Hi, welcome everybody. Nice to see you. Good evening. Okay,
Good evening.
all right. So here we are. We're going to program. I'll tell you where my marker is. You can correct me if I'm wrong. So okay, so my marker is on Vav.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Well,
Sounds good to you?
yeah, the last thing we did was the bet yourself.
Right. Okay.
Simon Bet.
Simon Bet. Right. You came in here.
Page you.
So, okay. So, right. So we finished with the shoes, right? We're done with the shoes.
Yes.
Okay. Enough about shoes, right? Enough already. Let's go on. So now we're doing Vav. So I think there's also a tour on this, right? Yeah, there's a tour. So we gotta do tour Vav basically. You guys can find that. Yakum, right? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So it says like this, right? You guys got it?
Yep.
The tour Vav. Okay, so it says V'yakum ve'yelech b'kfifat koma. So he says, get up from your bed, but go like bent a little bit down. Like don't be erect. Your posture. You know what I mean? Because that's like not respectful to the Shekhinah or whatever. This is the reason why he says that. So they say, right, that you shouldn't walk like like this, like these these tough guys in the street, they walk with their like neck straight, like as if they're penetrating into the heavens, with their neck,
All high.
you know what I mean? What I'm talking about?
Yeah, like that.
So you gotta be a little bit bent down, for that's for like for humility, to be aware of your creator. That's the idea, Oh, okay. Report them to me. I'll get them in trouble. I'll have them reported, every one of them. No problem.
What about your posture?
I'm sorry.
What about your posture?
That's what he's talking about. Like, the posture, the head, the whole, the whole bodily posture. Okay, yeah, we're gonna get into this now. So so it says Kedita Perek Kama de Kiddushin. Where does this come from? From the first Perek of Kiddushin in the Gemara. It says Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Like this rabbi says, Asur lelech bekoma zekufa. What does that mean? You're not allowed to go with erect posture. You walk with erect posture. Like those guys, Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right, exactly. So it's a Shenimar, as it says, Melochol haaretz kevodo. What does that mean? The whole land is full of the glory of God. So if it's full of glory, how can you stick your head up into His glory? Like, who are you? What do you think you are? But you gotta be careful with that. That's what he's trying to tell you. Right? The Shenimar, as it says, Melochol haaretz kevodo, v'chaser rosho. Also, you gotta cover your head. Put a kippah. Do is put something on there. I don't know. What do you want to put? Baseball bat? You gotta put something, right? So Kedeita Nami. So it says, right? Hatam Rav. It says in Gemara there. Ravuna lo azid daradamot begilui harosh. It says, right, that Ravuna wouldn't go 4 amot, which is how much? About 2 meters, right? 4 amot, 6 feet. He wouldn't go 6 feet without what? Without covering his head. That's where we get this halakha, remember, everybody knows, right? You're not to go 4 amot without covering your head. This is where it comes from. So it says, why? What's the reason why? Amar Shechina lemala meroshi. What does that mean? The Shechina, the divine presence, is on my head. So if that's the case, I got to cover my head to be humble, to humble myself. That's the idea. Oh, good. Okay, good question. Yeah. So you guys got an answer for that? If not, I'll help you. Okay. So yeah, it's true. Yeah. Wow. What do you think?
Covering head shows like there's like Hashem is on top of you, like He's looking.
Sure, right. But he's saying, but it's everywhere. What's the big deal? In your head. What's the question? So you know what the answer is, right? The answer is, first of all, there's a whole concepts about this in the Kabbalah. The Ben Ish Chai talks about this. So, before even that I saw the Ben Ish Chai, I guessed this answer myself too. I got to it somehow. On my own volition. What's the idea? There's Shekhinah everywhere, but there's different levels, different concentration, Some places have more Shekhinah than others. So, for instance, right, the classic example is, you have the Shekhinah on the street, right, which is a lower level, right, especially 108 over there, right, over there. And then you have the Bet Knesset, right, the synagogue, which is a higher level, obviously. You know what I mean? How can you compare the Shekhinah in the synagogue to the Shekhinah on the street? It's not the same thing, right? Otherwise, why do we come to the synagogue to pray? The whole point is you want to be in the place of the Shekhinah. That's the whole point, right? Exactly. So the concentration is greater. That's the idea. So here also, right, there's a great deal of concentration of Shekhinah where? On your head. Why is that? Because the soul is more in the brain than anywhere else in the body. You know what I mean? It's in the brain. Why? Because the brain is kadosh. That's where your thought patterns go. You know what I mean? Your thought process. So there's nothing, by the way, in the human being, there's nothing more holy than the thoughts. You know what I mean? The thoughts are the holiest things that there are, the most sublime, pure things in the world. So therefore, right, where is the Shekhinah concentrated in the person? In his head. There's also another place, right, which is what? The heart, right? That's why tefillin we put on the head and on the heart. Those are the two places where the Shekhinah is. You know what I mean? Because the soul rests there.
But, Rabbi,
yeah.
But some people who are left-handed, they put the tefillin on their right hand.
Absolutely, right. Yeah, it's as the Gemara says, right? What's the reason for that? Because it says, right, that you should use your left hand. So the Gemara darshans, it means the weaker hand. That's what it means, the hand which is weak.
Mm.
So if the weaker hand for you is the right hand, because you're lefty, so you gotta do the opposite way.
But it won't be connected to your heart.
Oh, it's a good question, by the way. The truth is, that the heart is there, but you're right. On the left side, it's a little bit more concentrated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what can we do? That a person who's lefty, right, he's got to do it that way, because the Torah tells you to put it on your weaker hand. This is the reason why. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting thing, what you're saying, really. It's quite fascinating, but that's the way we learn the Gemara, these things. That's the way it's brought down the Gemara. So, what can we do? We're not going to argue with the Gemara, right? We're going to do whatever it says. So that's the way it's brought down. So, good questions. Good questions. Yeah. So anyway, I already said, right, Shekhinah is on my head. So therefore, he used to cover his head, right? So the truth is, that there is one who argues with this. In the Shulchan Aruch, we're going to see that Maran Paskin is like this, right? In the Shulchan Aruch, like what we just said. What does that mean? The person has to cover his head. What does that mean? He can't walk 4 amot without covering his head. You know what I mean? That's what it means. What about the ladies, by the way, the ladies on Zoom? What's going on with you guys? So the truth is, the women don't have to cover their head like the men, only if they're married. If they're married, so then they got to cover their head, But at home, they don't have to. But according to Kabbalah, there's also inyan to do at home also as well. You know what I mean? So, but according to Halakha, definitely men and women are not the same. You know what I mean? It's not the same thing. Like, one time I remember one of our friends who moved away from here. He went to Fresh Meadows. You remember this guy. Well, I don't want to mention his name, but anyway, right?
Oh boy.
No, he's one of the, he's known in our community. He's known. So, but he's not here anymore. So he left about 2 years ago, whatever. So I lost contact with him, by the way. I don't know what's going on with him. He used to, he called me and stuff, whatever, text, whatever. Nothing anymore. Anyway, right? I remember, what was I gonna say? I forgot, whatever, but whatever it was. Anyway, the point is, right, that comes the Gra, right, Gaon Levina, and argues with this Shulchan Aruch. That we're gonna see it now in Shulchan Aruch. What does he say? Something interesting, He says that really it's not an obligation to cover your hair, right? To cover your head even from men. I'm sorry, yeah, we're talking about the women. I'm sorry, yeah. Anyway, we'll get back to that in a second. But says the Gaon Levina, you don't have to cover. It's not an obligation to cover your head. So what about the Gemara that says Rabbi Huna used to say that I cover my head and I don't go? So the Gra says like this, he has an interesting idea here. He says that since he's praising himself that he used to do that, that means that was something special, Otherwise, what are you praising yourself for? Everybody does it, you know what I mean? Like, what's the big deal? Yeah, I'm sorry. Right, exactly. So he said it's Hasidut. That's exactly what he said. You know what I mean? So how do we paskin? We don't paskin like the Gra. We paskin like the Shulchan Aruch. So what does that mean? That we consider it to be covering of the head obligation, not Hasidut. By the way, then how do we answer the claim of the Gra? How do we push him out? right? Can we push him out? A big man like this, big Adam Gadol. Can we push him out, or right? How do we prove him wrong? Let's figuratively, right? Okay, so how do we do it? So the truth is, that there's a little bit of a source somewhere else in the Gemara. You know what it says, right? There's a Gemara that says in a different place. If you see a person who doesn't cover his head, it's two possibilities, right? Either he's a what?
Not Jewish.
No, yeah, that's for sure. But we're talking about Jews.
That's
Two possibilities.
Not religious.
No, you're getting close, but not exactly, right? So it says the Gemara, either he's mamzer, or he's ben nida, one or the other. Understand what those two things mean? Ben nida means his mother didn't go to the mikveh. He was born, poor guy, right? Like most people today, unfortunately, What can we do, right? That's the way it is.
What does it matter if it's okay? He has like klipa and
Oh, so ben nida, he's damaged. His neshama is damaged. You understand? He's damaged. So he has like a brazenness, he's brazen. So the mamzer is also damaged, right? Even more, So the mamzer is even worse than the ben nida. You should know, by the way, something incredible, It says in the Zohar Kadosh that a mamzer, right? It says in the Torah that it goes forever, It never gets eliminated. Mamzerut. It goes for all generations, Even 20 generations down, still he's a mamzer. Okay, but ben nida. What about ben nida? Does it go forever or right? So the truth is, I remember when I was in Israel, I had a friend over there who's a big chacham. We used to talk together, in the Rav Vadia's Maran, the kollel over there. So Maran used to say, right, that that this rabbi used to say, he says, I think that even a ben nida goes forever, it never gets cured. Can you imagine if that was true? We'd be in big trouble, right? Because how does anybody have any, nobody has, you don't have any ancestors who didn't keep nida, right? There must be somebody, right? Yeah, so what can you do, So the truth is, that logically speaking, I didn't really agree with him. But then, after a couple of years later, I saw in the Zohar Kadosh, not like him, just like I suspected. So you know what it says in the Zohar Kadosh? How many generations does it take to cleanse the nida? 3 generations. So what does that mean? He's messed up, right? His son is messed up, but his grandson will be okay.
Wow.
Go to the 3rd generation. Can you imagine? It takes three generations to cure this problem. They're damaged until then, right? So that's similar to like what? Like right, Ger Mitzri, right? Egyptian convert or Edomi, right? Edomite. They're also 3rd generation. So it says in the Torah, right? So same thing here also. 3 generations it takes to cleanse them. So yeah, it's interesting, right? Interesting idea. So anyway, right? Getting back to what we said. So it says the Gemara like this, right? That what? If you see somebody who doesn't cover his hair, either he's mamzer or he's ben nida, one or the other. Damaged person, pagum, blemished. He's blemished. So what do you see from there, by the way? But what about the Gra? The Gra says chasidut, but you see, right? That if a person goes this way in the street, he's a blemished man. You got that? So what would the Gra answer on that? What do you say? He knew, of course, but we still have to ask the question. You know what I mean? We still have to ask this question. You know what I mean? If he would have answered that question, that's something else, but he didn't. Right? So understand? So now let me tell you. Here's the thing. Okay, so since the Gemara says that the person who's not covering his hair is damaged, you see from there, Be'emet, it's a real proof that it's an obligation. Because otherwise, how would you say, right, that the person is damaged? You know what I mean? You could just say, oh, he's not a Hasid. That's not what it says. Oh, so who's right? Maran is right. Shulchan Aruch is right, for sure. No question about it. No question about it.
What if you're home? What if you're at home?
Oh, same thing. A man has to cover his head at home also. A man, yeah. A woman, that's something else. A woman, not really. Only Kabbalah. But according to Halakha, a man has to cover his head at his home. By the way, I'll tell you something really funny. I had a friend who we learned with here in Yeshiva, locally here in Queens, before I went to Israel. So he's a nice guy. He's like a rabbi here now, Main Street. So he's a Sephardi guy. So he used to tell me, he said, I told him, I said, we talked about how you person sleeps, whatever. So he told me, he says, I sleep with my kippah on, I said, wow, this I never heard, like usually people don't wear their kippah when they're sleeping.
I used to, as a kid, but I only stopped because
It kept falling. Okay, so the truth is, that it's kind of silly, to wear to wear a kippah when you're sleeping. You don't really need that. You know what I mean? It's not because what do you need it for? You're sleeping. You're not even conscious. You know what I mean? Now you have to worry about the Shekhinah when you're sleeping. It's not really. It's not really.
But there's
It also says 4 amot. What you're going 4 amot when you sleep? Well, what is it? What is it? Sleepwalking.
I don't mean to
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm listening to you.
don't mean to sidetrack the topic, but I
Yeah.
just want to quickly mention
Yeah.
isn't there opinion that says to wear tzitzit when you're sleeping?
Oh, yeah. We talked about that. Nisim raised
Yeah.
that question. So the truth is, that I remember, I'll tell you something really funny. That recently, like sometimes when I eat, I take off my tzitzit because it gets dirty, it gets stained from the food. So one time I remember I took it off, to eat, and there was a guest over there that I had, and this person, likes me, in other words, they care for me, this person. So he told me, he says, how can you do that? What, you have to wear it all the time, no? So I told this person, I said, not really, So really, what is it then, right? It's not, the obligation doesn't go on the person, it goes on the beged, it goes on the clothing, you know what I mean? So if you have a 4-cornered beged, you need tzitzit. If you don't have one, you don't need tzitzit. This is according to halakha. This is the way it is. You understand?
Yeah.
So then why do we wear tzitzit inside? Because it protects you. It's protection. That's the reason why. Oh. That's very interesting, by the way. So you know what the Arizal says, right? That this mitzvah you do, when you put on the talit, when you put it on and
Talit gadol.
yeah, or even talit katan. He says, so here's the thing, right? According to Arizal, according to Kabbalah, talit katan is supposed to be inside, right? Not like the Ashkenazim, right? They put it outside. But our friend Malachi, he asked us about this. He said, we just got married here recently. He asked us, the Sephardim, they put inside or outside? So I told him, I said, Sephardim put inside. Because we do according to Kabbalah. The Ashkenazim, they do according to Halakha, according to the Pshat, which is outside. You know what I mean? So the Arizal says, but wait a second, you know what? If you're doing it inside, how do you fulfill the mitzvah of Orei Temoto, right? You should see them. So he says, when you put it on, that's when you do the mitzvah. That's what he says. This is the answer that he gives. Yeah.
Okay.
No problem. So therefore, right, the thing is like this, right? That we wear it. I personally, and also you God-fearing people, we wear it like pretty much all day and night, because of protection. It protects you from mazikim, from spiritual harm, from physical harm. Also, by the way, I heard also protects you. That's protection, So therefore, even though, right, according to the Pshat, according to the Rambam, at night, tzitzit there's no mitzvah of tzitzit at night, only in the daytime. You know what I mean? So at night you're patur. That's why, if you put on talit at night, do you bless on that?
No.
Why? Because you're patur at night. This is the reason why we don't bless. Understand? So, but nevertheless, because of the protection, we put it on. So I told my friend Nisim, when he was here, I don't know if you guys were here, but I told him, I said, it's good to wear it, when you sleep, but if you're married, probably better not to, because yeah, exactly. It's just not, doesn't work out. It just doesn't fit into the scheme of things. So you can understand. I don't have to tell you the details. Okay, so yeah, I don't have to go into details. Okay, so that's the way it is, right? So okay, very good. So that's why I say, Maran is for sure correct, no question about it. By the way, Maran is correct everywhere. He's always correct. So that's why we accepted the rulings of Maran. You know why? Because he's the best. Nobody like him. What do you think? It was an accident? What? Right, exactly. From Yosef until Yosef, there was nobody like Yosef. Exactly. Okay, very good. I'm sorry, somebody's asking a question. Okay, I guess not. Okay, so here we go. So let's look at the Shulchan Aruch on this, right? I'm sorry, first Bet Yosef, right? Let's see. Bet Yosef on this, and Vav, Bet Yosef Vav. It should be somewhere there in the margin, right? But don't look at the Bach. Make sure it's Bet Yosef. Don't go to the wrong side. Okay. V'yakum ve'elech, right? That's Bet Yosef. Got it? I can help you if you want.
Very bottom.
Very bottom?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's what it is, right? So it says, Kedaita per kama de Kiddushin, right? It says in the Kiddushin, this was all from the Torah, right? This language. Am Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, you got that? Asur lelech bekom askufa, shenemar melechol haaretz kevodo. Okay, now it says Maran, Piresh Rashi. So it says Rashi explains on this, melechol haaretz kevodo, right? That the whole world is full of glory. Mashma mishtarovev veored. Oh, so he says that language implies that the glory of God also comes down as well. In other words, it's on your head, right? That's the whole thing. Lemata, vehazokef kumato. So look what he says, right? The one who erects his posture, like he's pushing away the Shekhinah, pushing it away by being erect, You understand? This is what he's saying. Okay, so let's go on. So he says then, vechaser rosho, right? Next piece. You see that?
Yeah.
So it says, Kedita nami hatam. Prepare kama the Kiddushin. So it says over there, it's in Kiddushin, right? This Gemara about covering your head. Rav Huna used to cover his head, as we said, right? We're going to see that in the Shulchan Aruch, B'ezras Hashem. So okay. So then he goes into, that's already Zayin, I think, right? Is that Zayin or is that Vav?
The seed.
The tour.
The tour Vav is.
Okay, let's go back to the tour for a second. Let's just finish that because we didn't read that piece yet. Back to the tour. So it says like this, right? Dok nekevav. You got it, Yitzchak?
We're back in the
Yitzchak, you got it?
in the
Going back to the tour. Dok nekevav.
Yeah.
So it says Damar Rabbi Yochanan, right? So what does that mean? A person, by the way, somebody just asked me about this. So it says like this, right? That a person, before he goes to pray, he should go to the bathroom and check, what he has to do over there. I mean, if there's something to do, if you know what I mean, right? Go check yourself. That's what it means to say. Damar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, if you want to accept the yoke of heaven completely, so what should you do? First, go use the bathroom. Number one. Then wash your hands, right? As you see, right? Man used to do it this way, by the way. First, he would use the bathroom and then wash his hands. Man, this is the way man did. Yeah, absolutely. He didn't have the water in front of his bed, like some people do. He didn't have that. He didn't like that. He didn't like that. Ifaneh means right, go use the bathroom. Yes. Cleanse, vacate yourself, right? Whatever, right? Cleanse yourself, whatever. Then wash your hands. Then put tefillin. Say Kriyat Shema and do the tefillah, right? You see, by the way, that their tefillah was quite simple. Kriyat Shema and tefillah. They didn't have all this Kabbalistic stuff that we have today. It was much more simple, by the way, in those days. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Psukah Israel they had. Because there's a bracha for that. So it's not really something new. But I don't think they had all the stuff that we do today. For sure, it wasn't that big. We added a lot of stuff. And by the way, if you want to know why we did that, in other words, the truth is, if you look in the Rambam, where his tefillah ends in Shachrit. When you finish the Amidah, you say Kaddish. Finished. That's it. Tachanun and Kaddish. That's it. I feel it too, honestly. Honestly, to be honest with you, this is really the obligation of tefillah. On the basic level. The most basic level. So then, why do we do so much? Today, why do we add so many things? Like what happened? I mean, even the Shulchan Aruch, right? That was 500 years ago, by the way. Where does it end? The tefillah and shachrit in Shulchan Aruch. Uval Etzion, right? After that, finished. No Bet Yaakov, no this, right? Tefillah David, no this, no, it doesn't have that. So what happened, right? So Arizal explains this. He says that because the world is becoming more contaminated as time goes on, the galut, the klipot are increasing, So therefore, he says we need more prayers to get through, to break through. Right. It says in Shulchan Aruch, after the Kedusha of Uval Etzion, you can take off your tefillin. This was a custom by them in those days. But according to Kabbalah, you're supposed to leave it until Aleinu. According to Kabbalah.
But you can take it off.
Yeah, especially if you're in a hurry, you gotta go to work, whatever. Not everybody can be a Mekubal, a Kabbalist, Some people have to go to work, make a living, So what can you do? That's the way it is in life. They're going, they gotta go. So whatever it is, right? Okay. So as we said, right, that okay, good. So let's look at the Beit Yosef on this now. Go back to the Beit Yosef. It says Veivdok, right? I think so. Yeah. Just 1 second. Yeah, so it says the dokne kebab. So first, right, go see if you have to use the bathroom. That's the first thing you got to do. You know, Rabbi Yochanan wrote, said, by the way, the rabbi downstairs, Rabbi Chen, you know, when I gave a class on this one time, he asked a question. You know what his question was? You know, how can you use the bathroom because you're not allowed to touch yourself until you wash your hands. You know, so what's the answer to that? Use tissues. I mean, don't touch it directly on the, you know what I mean? That's what you do.
Rag or something.
Yeah. Because the ruach ra, the evil spirit, you know, can damage. I'm not talking about the skin. I'm talking about where there's holes in the body. The eyes, the nostrils, the mouth, and all these places where there's a hole in the body, right?
Yeah.
Where there's a cavity. So those places can be damaged by ruach ra. So no problem, you know. So the answer is that you can use a tissue, you know, if you have to touch those places. But directly, you shouldn't touch those places until you wash your hands. Exactly, because you can use a tissue. That's what I'm trying to tell you, right?
If you need.
Yeah, if you need to. I mean, sometimes you do, right? Whatever. You know. I'm not gonna get. You understand the point, right?
You could, if someone's not worried, you can always just wash and then do that.
I'm sorry. So that's exactly what I explained to him. You know that he said, you know, let's do it this way. You know, he says there's another option, which is to first go wash your hands first, you know, and then use the bathroom and then wash your hands again. This is what he suggested, you know. But the truth is, this is very problematic. Oh, okay. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay. Were you here when you were here? Okay. No. So, right, the reason why it's problematic is because when you go first, if you go first to wash your hands, okay, before you use the bathroom, that means that becomes your netilat yadayim, you know, because the ruach ra is coming off then. I mean, that means you have to bless on that, you know, because you're blessing on what? On your first washing, you know, when the ruach ra comes off, that's when you bless.
Why can't you just wash normally? Like you
Because that doesn't remove the ruach ra. You understand? That's the whole thing, right? The ruach ra is only removed by the three, you know, the three thing, you know, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? So yeah, so what happens like this, right? So now what happens is if you wash your hands first, okay, and your bladder is full of urine, excuse my expression, right? You know, it's not kavod to bless like that, you know, make a blessing. This is the reason why the rabbi didn't want to do it this way.
But didn't they say that Tefillah to do it like this? But you can also just wash like this.
Right. It's true what you're saying. In other words, this is what we do with the cup. That's Kabbalah, and using the sink is just basic halacha. You know. Yeah.
But either way, it removes.
It does. Yeah. According to halacha, you did the job. So what does that mean? If you would do it 3 times, you know, under the sink, right? You can't make a blessing afterwards when you do the second wash because you already did that.
What if you just don't do anything? Like people that don't know, they just take soap, they wash their hands.
Yeah.
They did it.
Yeah, I mean, if you did it 3 times, you did it. That's it. You're done. Right, but you know, I mean, when you're washing with soap, you know, sometimes it comes out to be 3. But anyway, right? I don't know, whatever comes out to be, right? Whatever it may be. The problem is if you do it 3 times, if you didn't do it 3 times, right? Either way, right? If you didn't do it 3 times, the ruach ra is still there. If you did it 3 times, you can't bless again the next time you wash your hands. So one or the other, right?
The workers, right? In the they don't. They're going.
Right. The goyim don't have ruach ra. They don't have. That's what it says in the poskim. Okay, you know, because they don't have the concept of tumah bichal. The goyim, you know what I mean? They don't have this. Only the Jews have this concept. Yeah, exactly. In other words, they're already, you know, in that state as it is. You know what I mean? In other words, you can't fix that. There's nothing you can fix. I mean, so this is what Kadosh talks about that, by the way, in depth, those things. I don't want to get into it now. This is not the time for that. But anyway, right, as we said, so therefore, right, what the problem is like this. If you go wash your hands first, and if you make the blessing, you're blessing with a full bladder, you know, not kavod. That's a bad choice. The other choice is, I'll wash my hands now, I won't bless, and then I'll wash again afterwards, and I'll bless then. But there's a problem of bracha al-batala. In other words, it may be right that you made the bracha too late. So therefore, this is why Maran didn't like it this way. So therefore, what he used to do, Maran, and I also do it this way. Yeah, we went after Maran, you know, whatever he did, we did. You know. So exactly, that's the way I do it, you know. And you know, I'm just careful not to touch myself anywhere, you know, like that, you know. Yeah, take a tissue, whatever, you know. What's the big deal? If you're careful, you can guard yourself. No big deal. No big thing. Okay, so anyway, right, as we said, he brings you the source for all this. Right, where is that? Brachot. It says over there, right, regarding this. That how do you accept the Ol Malchut Shamayim, right, completely? By use the bathroom, wash your hands, Kriyat Shema, Amidah. This is the Ol Malchut Shamayim. Be good. So that we finish the Siman. Let's go now and look at the Shulchan Aruch. Right? Yeah.
That they need to.
No, why you don't? It's good, you gotta ask questions. That's what we're here for. We're not here to be mannequins, you know what I mean? If I wanted mannequins, I'll just buy some mannequins. I'll put them in front of me, like pretend like they're Talmud. I can do that too. Okay. Okay. So, as we said, yes.
You did, correct me if I'm mistaken, but you did mention that, did you mention that Rav, that the Maran would base the halachot on the Shulchan Aruch based on majority, like 2 out of 3? I saw one of your videos one time you mentioned that.
Yes,
like,
yes.
There's like the Rambam.
The Rambam, the Rosh, and the Rif.
Right,
yeah,
like
yeah.
2 out of 3 would say one.
2 out of 3 ain't bad, as they say. I'm saying good. Yeah.
Because no, I just remember because you
Yeah.
said one time that you will follow the tour because that was more to the practical, like daily, what we do daily on a day-to-day basis.
Oh. So he
And
writes over
Rambam
there.
did, like-
Yeah, the truth is, I just remembered, my recollection comes back. He writes over there. By the way, one day we should read that, the introduction to the Bet Yosef. It's a good idea to read it. But you know what it says over there? It says, that he was thinking to do this Perush, the Bet Yosef, either on the Rambam or the tour. So he said the reason why he chose the tour, one of the reasons that he brings there, is because the tour brings several opinions sometimes, but the Rambam always brings basically one, his own. That's it.
Oh. So
You know what I mean?
so
So it's easier to build on that, to buy the Perush when you have like 2 sides. That's what he said, That was one of the things that he mentioned there. Just practical reasons,
Okay.
But as I said, right, I told you guys that he also wrote the Kesef Mishnah, which was on the Rambam. He wrote that too. So what's the difference between the Bet Yosef and Kesef Mishnah?
Bet Yosef will go in depth into the halakha of the reasoning behind it.
Right. So the truth is, the Kesef Mishnah is also quite deep. I must tell you. So what's the difference? The Rama said. What's the difference? You know what the difference is? Kesef Mishnah is really like explaining the Rambam, basically. This is going into halakha. Like more practical halakha. You know what I mean? Right. It's in other words, over there he's not really dealing with that so much. Like what's the psak halakha? What's the bottom line? Over here he deals with that. So therefore, the Bet Yosef is superior in that sense. You know what I mean? But if you want to know the pshat in the Rambam, you got to look over there in the Kesef Mishnah, right? That's Sometimes he explains the Rambam also in the Bet Yosef, by the way, very well. Sometimes he goes very deep into these things when it's needed.
A very important question. Do you take Rachel on this if you smell it?
Yeah, I think you should. Yeah, it comes from the trees, right? So it's atzeh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, coffee. It's a coffee. Coffee beans, I think, they grow on trees. Am I right or am I wrong? Check on Google. Yeah, of course. It's a nice smell, beautiful smell it has. Especially when you first open it, it's like, oh my God. One person, told me in Israel, that one of my friends, he said, they lived in Argentina. So in Argentina, what they do is they grow coffee like fresh in their backyard, So he said, we used to go out there, like pick out, like pick it, and like grind it up, like he said, the smell was like, it's like,
So is it obligation?
that what? That
Rachel on smell.
if you smell something good, yeah, you should bless on it, But there are rules about how to do and what to do, and when, and there's all kinds of rules. You should study them, those rules. We're gonna get to it. Eventually, we stick around for a couple of years. We'll get to it. Okay, so yeah, it's interesting. Whatever coffee. Yeah, it's a nice, beautiful smell. Coffee's beautiful.
So you're supposed to make sure it smells good first, then say the Rachel. So you smell it
You
twice.
know when you open it first, it's gonna smell good. You know what I mean? Like that. Like that's for sure. It's a given. But if it's something really, really old, so then I don't know. So then you should try it first. Like first try it, and if it has something, then bless. You know what I mean? Yeah, if you want to test something, like if it has a smell, first try it and then bless on it. That's what you do.
Don't do this by eating though. Like if I don't like it, not like it first. at the same time.
Oh, so why is that, by the way? Okay, it's a good question. So why
You
is that?
benefit from the food. or not?
Because by food, we assume that you're going to enjoy it. In other words, there's going to be something there you're going to enjoy. You know what I mean? In other words, even like, let's say if you eat the food, right, which is not really like your taste, like it's not really your cup of tea,
Yeah, right.
But anyway, right, it has some sweetness, you're going to get something from it, some pleasure. So you have to bless on that. You know what I mean? But when it comes to smell, if it has no smell, you can't bless. You know what I mean? On food, it never comes out to be because you enjoyed something there, more or less, right? Unless it's like totally, destroyed, right? Totally demolished. I'm not talking about that, right? Totally spoiled. I'm not talking about that. But... Okay, that's the idea. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch. Let me just get there. So we're doing hey, we finished, right? Just above, right?
Yep.
Okay, so it says in Shulchan Aruch Vav, Asur lelech b'koma zekufa. You should not allowed to go, right, with your erect posture, as we said, right? So bend down a little bit, bend down a little bit. V'lo yelech talad amot b'gilui rosh. Don't go for amot without covering your hair, your head.
When the bed is there?
Shulchan
Shulchan
Aruch,
Aruch, in
Seat
back.
Vav. Gotta go to Yose, right? Flip over. Got that tissue.
You're using
The
knee
tissue
seam,
is your
so-
marker.
Yeah, you're using knee seam, so the tissue is
Yeah, this is Kolel style. It's a real Kolel style. Okay. So, right, as we said, first thing, don't go erect posture. Number one, right, if you're going Arba Amot, cover your head. So it says in parentheses, right, because of Shechina. Also, right, check yourself in the bathroom, see what you have to do there. And kol gufo, and then says the Rama, like cover your body. Right, so this is getting from the Or Zarua, right? We didn't see this in the Bet Yosef. The Rama sometimes brings things from other sources, So what does he say over here? Right, kol gufo, cover your body. In other words, put on your clothes, right? Get dressed. And then he says, don't go barefoot. Right. So by the way, when he says barefoot, he means like outside,
Okay.
like I'm not talking about on the carpet.
No.
That's not what it means. Right. We're talking about when you go outside because it's dangerous, to go barefoot out, get a cut, you can cut your feet, get damaged like that, injured. This is the reason why. This is it's mamash like sakana, like it's dangerous to walk around barefoot, it's so not a good idea to do that. There are some people like that, by the way. I know they love it.
Why?
Like it makes them feel free, like they're nature's girl, nature's boy, Right. The country people like to do that. They like to wear barefoot, the grass and stuff. Yeah, how it is, It's, good old days, right? But the truth is, according to halakha, not really so good to do that, especially out here, right? You got all kinds of stuff going on. Also, there's germs, there's all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of danger, when you walk around barefoot.
Country people, they're immune from it,
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They have like calluses, on their feet, like about this thick, protects them from everything. You're right. Okay, I agree with you. Okay, whatever. But anyway, right, it's still dangerous a little bit. It's also not derech eretz, like when you walk around like that in the street. You look like an idiot. I mean, basically what it is.
When you're going to like it sounds stupid, but when you're going to like like there's a certain like going to a scheduled pool, like a swimming thing. That's not.
No, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about a person who's swimming or going to the shower or whatever, right? Or jacuzzi, right? We're not talking about that, obviously. Right, of course. Every place has its own derech eretz, There's swimming pool and there's the street, right? Everything has its own thing. And by the way, obviously, people don't wear a kippah when they're swimming, Give me a break, Who wears a kippah when you swim? Yeah, some people do. Yeah. Chassidut, Chassidut, right? That's what it is. But I mean, most people don't do that. Let's face it, right? So that's the way it is. And okay, whatever. Yeah. So, but the truth is, a person who's really Chassid, he probably would. He would cover his head even in the beach. First of all, he shouldn't be at the beach, but if he is, if he's a real Chassid, he shouldn't even be there. Yeah, those are the fake ones. I'm talking about the real guys, the Baba Sali types, this kind of people, right? Stipler, Can you imagine seeing Baba Sali on the beach, swimming over there with a bathing suit, doesn't exactly look plausible, right? Okay. Okay, so that's the way it is. So as we said, right, the Ramah says, cover your body and don't walk around barefoot. And he says, if not, don't care about it. Look what it says, right? Good advice. Accustom yourself to go to the bathroom at least in the morning or at night. Like in other words, make sure you clean out your body. Shehu is rizut v'nekiut. This is, what does that mean? It says it's cleanliness and eagerness. Like whatever, industriousness, whatever. So it's a good way of living. In other words, healthy living, right? That's what it means.
So, Rabbi, it sounds like there's advice and halakha.
Yeah, the truth is, that there are many things in the Shulchan Aruch, which are just like good advice. Not everything is halakha. That's by the way one of the challenges. If a person really learns, the right way. Sometimes you have to know that what you're reading is not halakha. It's just good advice. You got to research. Like you got to go into the sources, and see what's going on. You got to spend some time on
It could
that.
also be just an opinion that we don't follow.
I'm sorry.
It could be also just an opinion, but we don't follow it.
Yeah, no, that also for sure. No question about that. I mean, there's all kinds of opinions out there, but I'm talking about something in the Shulchan Aruch, that we do usually follow. But even in the Shulchan Aruch, there's just good advice. There's some things which are good advice there. Not really halakha. There's all kinds of discussion about that, by the way, in poskim. What is halakha? What is not halakha? Some say, by the way, some poskim say, as a general rule, whatever is not mentioned in the Talmud is not halakha. In other words, they brought it in later. It's not called halakha. Just like a minhag, because whatever is not in the Talmud, that means we didn't receive it on Har Sinai. We didn't get that on Har Sinai. Except if it's Kabbalah, got it from the Navi. That's something else. I'm not talking about that. But Stam people, made all kinds of things, from their head. That's not from Har Sinai. This is just, yeah. So they say it's not really obligation, things like this. There are some people like this, but it really requires a lot of research, I'll tell you with these kinds of things, best thing is to be humble, like humble yourself, just read what other people say, and you'll absorb, the wisdom of the sages, and it'll get to you and you'll understand better, That's the best thing to do when it comes to learning, By the way, just you should know that, there's a very big concept in learning that a person also has to learn with anava, with humility. So it's brought down in the Chazal in many places, right? Even in Pirkei Avot, it's brought down. You know what it says, right? Gasli bo be'alacha, gasli bo. You know what that means? A person who learns halacha in a more very carefree way. Yeah, I think it's like this. I think it's like that. No source, no nothing to base yourself on. Just like making things up as you go along. You know what I mean? This is a very dirty way of learning halacha. Very crooked. This is crooked halacha. So what does a person have to do with halacha? Humble yourself. What does that mean? First, look what the sages said. The Talmud. Then look at the Rishonim. Rambam, Rashi, Tosfot, Ritva, Rashba. All these Rishonim. The Rosh, right? The Rif. Look what they said. Look what the Shulchan Aruch says. And then maybe you can have something on your own also to add. But until you saw all those things, what can you add? What's there to add? First, look at the sources. What are you adding stuff for? That's what they asked me one time. Rav Moshe Feinstein. They asked him, because there's this by the Ashkenazim. There's this concept called dat Torah. By them, it's a famous concept. You know what that means? Like a rabbi who knows how to learn. In other words, whatever he says is authoritative. Dat Torah. He has dat Torah. So they asked Rav Moshe Feinstein one time. What is dat Torah? What is that? In other words, the way they say it's it's very vague. What does that mean? How do you know if a person has dat Torah or not? Maybe he has, maybe he doesn't have. Who knows? So you know what he says? Moshe Feinstein. He says, "What's dat Torah? You learn Talmud, Rishonim, right, and Shulchan Aruch. If you know that, you have dat Torah. That's what it means. Dat Torah. You got it? Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Don't mean to interrupt. But suppose all of these things, the Ritvas, Rashi, then what? Then people like Chacham Ovadia and his son Rav Yitzchak Yosef, what are their halakha based on Shulchan Aruch and all those opinions?
So you should know, by the way, that Maran, this is the way Maran used to learn, just like I told you. This is the way he learned. So what does that mean? I always, this always comes up, right? So the Yalkut Yosef guys, the Ben Ish Chai guys, what I mean? What are they doing? They're just reading the end product, the end.
Yeah.
But they're not looking at the beginning, because so they don't know what the heck they're talking about. I'm sorry to tell you. They have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, but
So they say, well, it says like this, so it must be like that, and they're making all kinds of deductions, right? All kinds of things. This is all pasul. It's all pasul.
but Svarim like
Yeah.
Chazon Ovadia and so on, are
Yeah.
are they just like repeating in a way of what maybe Shulchan Aruch was saying, or the Torah?
This is, it's updating the Shulchan Aruch. In other words, coming to our generation, you know what I mean? With all kinds of questions that we have today, come up today. Not everything is discussed in Shulchan Aruch, you know what I mean? We have all kinds of new situations. So in the Yalkut Yosef, and in books like this, the Achronim of our times, they're discussing new things which came up today in our generation, Like for instance, one of our friends, asked me about, using a pub for milk on Shabbat, So where are you going to find that? What, the Rashba you're going to find that? No, they didn't have those things in those days, So where are you going to find it? So that's why I look in the newer books, I mean? Where did I look? I looked in Yalkut Yosef, I looked in some other books, and I found it, that's the way it is.
And later,
Shminat Shabbat Kilchata, yeah, like current authorities, today's authorities, some of them passed away, some of them are still alive, blah, blah, blah. That's where you find these modern things, By the way, you should know that if you want to know modern halacha, you know where it's really found today? Like most of the questions you have in halacha, you can answer them by doing two things, learning two books. You know what they are? The rabbi's books, Yabbi Omer, those books, Chazon Ovadia, all those books. Learn all those books. Most of your questions will be answered over there. The other one is Rav Moshe Feinstein, like Igrot Moshe. A lot of the modern questions over there came up in America. All kinds of issues, all kinds of stuff. That comes up in modern day life. He covers so much of it. You can't imagine, you can't imagine how much he covers on these things. So it's like when you know these two books, Yabbi Omer, Igrot Moshe, you got today's world covered, pretty much, more or less. Most of the questions that you have will be answered there.
But Rav Feinstein was Ashkenazi, so
yeah.
If we have a question and it's actually written down in the Igrot Moshe, and whatever he answers, do we follow it? So
it's a whole discussion in itself, right? Do we follow the Ashkenazi poskim? We don't follow them. So the truth is, that when it comes to wisdom, as we said, right, it's dat Torah. You know what I mean? We have to look at all the poskim. Doesn't matter whether Ashkenazi or Sephardi, because they all have something to contribute. They learned Torah all their life. These people, and they became great people. So what does that mean? They always have something good to say. That you should listen to those things. So the most important thing to do, when it comes to practical halacha today, is to see the new stuff, because that's where it's covered. All this new stuff. You know what I mean? So you got to look there, and find these things. So that's the way to do it. So the truth is, that sometimes when there's a trend, so there, as we said, right, that we go like Maran, and the Ashkenazim they go like the Ramah. So that's clear. You can't cross that border. You know what I mean? We can't do like Maran or Ramah. They cannot do like Maran against Ramah. Can't do that. That's one thing. But when it comes to just when it comes to just questions of wisdom, like having a good idea how to solve a problem in halacha, doesn't matter whether it's Ashkenazi or Sephardi, if he has a good idea, he's got a good idea, has a chidush, some kind of a nice idea to solve the problem. You got to listen to those things. I'll tell you something really funny, that Maran Ovadia, he was such a, why do I tell you about the Anava? Because he was such an Anav, the rabbi, when it comes to learning. He used to learn all the new books that came out, like all the authors, like today, he used to learn every one of them, without exception. Okay. Didn't care if they were big people or medium size or small. Somebody wrote a book, he would read it. So why did he do that? Because he wanted to get all the wisdom, from all the authors. He wanted to get a conglomeration of everything. That's why he became so great, so accepted. You know why? Because he took from everybody. This is anava, this is humility, when you don't say, oh yeah, I know everything, just believe me, believe me. What believe you? Come on, look in the books, we have books, look, open them up and see what's going on, why should I believe you? What who are you, Moshe Rabbeinu? What are you? You have to have humility. That's humility, So humility means that Maran, that's what it says about Bet Hillel, by the way. Why they pass like Bet Hillel? It's in the Gemara. Because they used to look at all the other opinions before they made their own opinion. You know what I mean? So that comes out to be better.
Not Bet Shammai.
Bet Shammai was more like, givurot, might, they strong, one strong. But Bet Hillel was humble, there was humility. So what does that mean? They would see first what Bet Shammai says, and think about that for a while, and then see, they agree, they don't agree, they have some sources with it, some sources against it. That's how Maran was, Maran, he knew everybody what they wrote. All the authors of our generation. One time I'll tell you a funny story, right? Rav Vazner, one of the great poskim of our generation, Rav Vazner, he also passed away. They all passed away, by the way, all the big people. So Rav Vazner, he came to see Maran to visit him about 8 years ago. It was more, 9 years ago, 10 years ago. He came to visit him before he passed away, before they both passed away. So what happened was that the rabbi really liked him and he liked the rabbi. They both liked each other, good friends. So they got into some argument about halacha, something, whatever. They started to argue, like always, What do rabbis do? They argue all day. What do they do? What else is there to do? So they started to argue about something. So the rabbi, told them, he said, excuse me, he says, Rav, he says, you in your own book, what you're saying now, you wrote just the opposite of this, what you're telling me now. That's what he told him, So he was astonished, Rav Vazner. He said, he knows my books better than I do. I don't remember what I wrote over this. So, the rabbi was so expert in other people's books, he knew those books better than they do. This is the way he was, That's why Maran was the greatest. Nobody was like him. The humility that he had. Baruch Hashem, he was zocheh to have somebody like that in that generation. I remember also another story. We'll stop here. I don't want you guys to one, but there's also a story of Rav Shach. Who was a big Rosh Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. So they say that one time, Rav Shach was like heavily into Rambam. Like his whole life he was working on the Rambam, writing Perushim on the Rambam. His major work that he wrote was totally on the Rambam, Rav Shach. What was it called again? Avi Ezri, right? It's a book called Avi Ezri, written by Rav Shach, totally on the Rambam, like explaining the Rambam everywhere. So his whole shiurim, they used to give, when he was Rosh Shiva in Panovich, was all Rambam shiurim. Because he was Rambam. So one time he came out, gave a shiur, and the Talmidim are there sitting there. So he brought two places in the Rambam, one contradicts the other, So he said, he gave an explanation, to reconcile the contradiction, no contradiction, right? I'm sorry, no, you know what it was? He brought a Rambam, and he couldn't understand it, so he explained it in a certain way. So what happened was that one Talmid over there that was there, sharp guy, sharp kid, so he caught him, he says, no, the Rambam somewhere else doesn't say like that, but how you explained it. So he showed him up, he embarrassed him like that, He made a monkey out of him. Excuse my expression, right? But it's allowed to do that. This is not lashon hara. You understand? When it comes to learning, you're arguing. This is not lashon hara. What has to do with lashon hara? We're arguing about the truth. You know what I mean? This is the way of the Torah. So he called. So Shach, when he heard this, comment from this boy, right? What do you think he did to him? He expelled him from the school, right? What do you think he did? So you know what he did? He said he saw that the kid was right, like he remembered it, So he said, he told the kid, the Talmidim, he says, everything which I've said is totally wrong. He says, we're going to end the shiur over here. Everybody pack up and go home. So he just packed up and went home. So he stopped the shiur, Why? Because he saw that the whole premise of the shiur was wrong. This kid showed him up, like this. You know what I mean? So what do you learn from there, right? What's the lesson? The lesson is that Rav Shach was so humble, that if he would hear something from the Rambam, he would just like pack up his books and leave, like he wouldn't even, like, what do you think? I'm going to argue with the Rambam? Like, what's the argument? You know what I mean? So that's the thing, the big people, they humble themselves before the Rishonim, the early authorities, they don't argue with the earlier people. This is the way of the big people. When you humble yourself, and not argue with the big people who are in the Rishonim, the former authorities, Hashem will make you great because you prove that you're a humble person. That's what it is. Everything is humility. So even in learning, getting to the truth and passing the halakha truthfully, it's all about humility. Chazak Baruch. Laila Tov. Thanks for coming. See you tomorrow. We got a little sidetracked, but it was good. We got some words of Musar a little bit, right? Chazak Baruch. Thanks for coming, Zoom people. God bless you.
Bye.
Blessed. See you tomorrow, hopefully. So I finally got that key, for the door. They changed it. Yeah, it was a big problem for me. Last week I had a big problem with that.
You mentioned